Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our next installment of BBB's COVID-19 webinar series. Today's title is PPP Loans and Loan Forgiveness, What You Need to Know. My name is Luke Fry. I'm the Associate Director of Communication at BBB Serving Connecticut. I also have a great staff member, Joni Green, who's going to be helping out with Q&A later in today's broadcast. Just a reminder, everybody is in mute. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in our questions box, and we will try to cover as many as possible since we do anticipate having quite a few questions throughout this broadcast. So as Connecticut businesses are slowly reopening, a few more industries are opening up next week. A lot of companies have applied and received a PPP loan. So a lot of their questions are, now what? So we figured today would be a great time to bring back our great rep from SBA to help clear the air on any updates and changes made to that PPP program, since it seems like things change almost daily, and especially for a business owner. So welcome, Moriama Gutierrez. She is the Assistant District Director for Economic Development at SBA here at our Connecticut office. Moriama, thank you for joining us again today and taking some time out of your day to help our ABs and help Connecticut business owners really get these updates and hear updates about their PPP loans and programs.
Thank you, Luke, for the invite. Thank you to Jackie. Thank you to Joni. Thank you to your team at the BBB. You guys are amazing. Again, I'm here to serve, right? Government employees. It's been quite the ride, right? And so I appreciate the invite, and I want to give the full disclosure that because the whole CARES Act is such a fluid, I would say, type of rule and regulation that's out there, and things change so rapidly, I'm going to give you what I have today. However, it can be different by what's tomorrow, Friday? By Friday, yes, because one of the things that we've learned is that for some reason, late Friday nights, the U.S. Treasury puts out something completely new. So, so every week it's kind of like a new little training session that we have to go through.
Wow.
So that
I'm going to turn it over to you. Yeah, take it away.
Okay, so that being said, I'm just going to go over some of the basics of the Small Business Paycheck Protection Program in terms of why it was created and the purpose of it and where it stands as of today at 1:05 in the afternoon. So the paycheck, just a quick overview for those of you that are not familiar with the program or have not applied or are not sure what to do with it. So the paycheck, it's what it's for is, it's for payment protection. So in a gist, it's all about keeping yourself, if you're an independent contractor or if you have employees, keeping them off payroll. And that's what it was designed for, because the nation pretty much shut down in March. And when it shut down, there was no kind of plan as to, well, what's going to happen with our economy and our small businesses, and what do we do next? So the U.S. Treasury and the SBA joined forces, and this is something that has never been done in terms of having a national pandemic, right? We normally have, when we have disaster declarations, they're usually declared, by states, and it's usually I would say, some type of, hurricane or storm or flooding, nevertheless. But this is something that's national and it's affecting everyone. So there was no protocols put in place. So this was something that was kind of created last minute, and so that's why it's been a fluid document, and it's been, kind of getting revised as we go. So what the Payment Protection Program is, it's a program that's available through our participating lenders. And so SBA has a list of participating lenders throughout the nation. And I could tell you that in Connecticut, we have over 53, and just about every lending institution that you've heard of is already an SBA participating lenders. So one of the things that the SBA did was they just, they included a link so that no matter where you are in the nation, you can find a lender in your area that will facilitate the loan for you. So again, it was designed to provide direct incentive for small businesses to keep their workers on payroll during the pandemic, during the time in which your business is closed. When the funds could be used for, originally it was for up to cover 8 weeks of payroll costs, and that included the benefits. And so in the beginning, it was 75% for payroll costs. The other 25% was used to pay interest on mortgages, rent, and utilities for the small business. And so we had a lot of questions regarding, can small businesses and sole proprietors apply, right? Because you have a lot of consultants out there. We have a lot of real estate agents, for example, that are basically self-employed. And so they are what they call 1099s. And so originally, what they did was, when this program opened up, they were not eligible to apply right away. So I believe it was after April 10th that independent contractors and self-employed individuals could apply. So the Paycheck Protection Program fell under what they called the CARES Act, the economic relief plan that the government put together. And so last week on June 5th, the Paycheck Protection Program now is what called also called the Flexibility Act of 2020 was signed into law. So it amended the CARES Act. And so the interim final rule revised SBA's interim rule that was posted on April 2nd. So a lot of, again, what came out originally on April 2nd when the PPP, which is what we're calling the Paycheck Protection Program plan, came out, was recently amended. It changed key provisions such as the maturity of the loan, the deferment of the loan payments, forgiveness provisions, and to conform the Flexibility Act. Because again, it was put out, I would say, in a rush, but as time went through, one of the things that we realized and everyone realized is that it wasn't kind of like one size fits all, and we really didn't know how long small businesses, our businesses would be shut down. And so we've learned a lot along the way. And so for this reason is that, the document has been amended several times. So the last time it was amended was June 5th, which was Friday. Next. So I like to give stats because everybody wants to know, what are we doing in Connecticut, right? So we get weekly numbers in terms of how we're doing, and this is broken. This is public information. It's even on our website. So through June 6th of 2020, the state of Connecticut has approved 56,704 loans. That's totaling $6,589,000,000 and so much dollars. And so that's a lot of money that has been approved for the state of Connecticut. So I really want everybody to take a look at that because you still have folks out there that either have not yet applied or maybe have applied, but the funds have not been dispersed yet. But nevertheless, just so you know, there has been a lot of money that has been approved and that has been dispersed and is out there in the hands of small business owners such as yourselves that are on the phone today. Next. So these are some updates due to the Senate hearings that took place. So there were Senate hearings that took place on Tuesday morning. And so these are just some notes that I put here to myself, and I'll go through them in terms of Secretary Mnuchin of the U.S. Treasury mentioned that the updated safe harbor will make calculations. And excuse me one second. Okay, I apologize. The screen just kind of went blank on me. He will make calculations on the loan forgiveness document. So there was a loan forgiveness document that was released. It was about 11 pages long, and it was released, I want to say, a couple weeks ago. So there were some amendments made on that because a lot of folks, said it was super confusing. And so that, you would basically have to hire, either an attorney or an accountant to be able to put together, to fill out the form. So what they said now is that it's going to make the calculations easier, and a small business will not need a lawyer or an accountant to complete the forgiveness. It's something that you can do yourself. It was also mentioned that a third-party application app is available to help with forgiveness. So a small business will be able to submit data and receive forgiveness forms within 15 minutes. So that's really great that they're going to create an app online that you can kind of do it yourself. And so again, it's going to be easier. It's going to be a do-it-yourself, which was not the way it looked about 2 weeks ago when they released that 11-page document that I mentioned earlier. So now, with the PPP approvals, originally there was a 2-year term. If for anyone that receives funds after June 5th, once the bill was amended, they will have a 5-year term rather than a 2-year term for anyone that has already received funding for the PPP. And so again, if it was prior to June 5th, the lender and the borrower then have to agree on an extension beyond 2 years. That would be something that you would work out with your lender. It's not one size fits all, right? There can be some accommodations made depending on the situation, depending on the business. And so again, no increases can be made once the PPP has been submitted as part of, the PPP report, because again, once there's several, I would say, layers to this. Once, because it's not you as the borrower working with the lender also has to submit it through what we call an E-Tran system, which is RSBA. So then there's a second set, I would say, of loan officers and underwriters looking at the loan. And so if a lender here, if your lender here has already, made an approval for a specific amount made, and that would be based on W-2s, based on account receivables, it's really hard to make those changes later if you're thinking, oh, well, I need more money. So, and again, we're waiting for more guidance on the deferment of the loan. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the EIDL loan later, but here I just put notes for myself. Is it still a thing? An EIDL is an economic injury disaster loan. Is it still a thing? Yes. However, it's currently accepting applications for agricultural businesses, farmers, livestock. And EIDL was the first loan program that was put out under the CARES Act, and the Paycheck Protection Program came a little bit later. So I'll show you in the next few slides where we are with the EIDL in terms of numbers. Next, please. So with part of the changes, I tried to kind of make it simple for myself and for you as well. So you have basically 24 weeks to use funds and rehire. So originally you had 8, now you have 24 weeks to use the PPP loan for payroll and operating expenses. So again, it went up from the 8-week period up to now 24. And so now, whereas originally you had up until June 30th, now you have up until December 31st. And so that works much better for a lot of businesses, because for some small businesses, again, the loan, once the loan is dispersed in your account, that's where we start counting for payroll. And so for a lot of folks, it did not make sense, because they would have kind of like this, they would end up with like extra cash, and it's like, wait a minute, I can't really use all this all this money up in the next 8 weeks. What do I do? So there were a lot of small businesses that formula didn't really work for. So that's why they made the extension. And so whereas I mentioned earlier, the way this was broken down was 75-25, 75% for payroll, the other 25% for rent, utilities, and lease or mortgage. Now they broke it down 60-40. So now your business has a little bit more flexibility in how they use the loan and still be eligible for loan forgiveness. So payroll expenses need to be only 60% of the loan now instead of the previous 75%. So know that, because again, if you only, for some people that works a lot better because they didn't need that whole 75%. So 60% for payroll, part of the loan forgiveness, and then the other 40% for utilities, again, mortgage, lease. And again, that 40% is not forgivable. So that 40% is what becomes a loan. Now you can defer payroll taxes. So under the CARES Act, you were not able to defer payroll taxes. Now you can. So that's going to make a lot of people happy. You can also adjust your payroll to reflect reasonable staffing. So 2 new exceptions that were made are allowing borrowers to achieve the full PPP loan forgiveness. So because a lot of times rehiring is not successful, or the state restrictions prevent you from operating fully. So depending on the type of business you are, again, in Connecticut, as you could see, we're opening up our businesses in stages depending on, on the type of business that you have. So this is much easier in being able to adjust how you're going to allocate the proceeds of the loan that go towards payroll. And again, if it's after June 5th, that you receive, that the loan is approved and is dispersed in your account, you have 5 years to repay, which is much better than the initial 2 years. And so with the approval of your lending, existing borrowers can extend the payments on the 1% loan over 5 years instead of 2. Remember, the interest is 1%. Okay, so that is now, as of June 5th, payable over 5 years. Next, please. Again, these were the modifications that we had made, and so I have already kind of gone through some of them. But just remember that we've extended the covered period for 24 weeks after the date of the loan disbursement. Lower the amount of loan proceeds that must be used for payroll costs from 75% to 60%. And again, what we call a safe harbor, providing the safe harbor from loan forgiveness reductions for borrowers that are unable to return to the same level of business activity due to compliance with COVID requirements, related to work or customer safety. So for example, if you owned a nail salon, you haven't opened yet. So you're not, what applies to you is completely different than what would have applied to, let's say, a manufacturer that probably opened in stage 1 for the state of Connecticut. So again, one of the other modifications was increase the maturity of the loans to 5 years, extending the deferral period for borrower payments, and and again, the deferral period for borrower payments of principal, interest, and fees on the PPP. So, and in addition, the new rules will confirm that June 30th, 2020 remains the last date on which a PPP loan application can be approved. So we only have a couple more weeks. So we're really trying to get the word out for some folks that have maybe been on the fence in terms of, should I apply or not? Is there funding? Yes, there is. I will show you in the next few slides how much money there is still left in the pot. So you can definitely, there is still time to apply.
And talking about that too, we actually had a question come in. When is the actual last date that you can apply? I know there it's talking about last date it can be approved. Would you suggest applying prior to the end of June or
Yes.
that date?
Try to
Okay.
apply prior, because you don't want to, be one of these last minute folks, because the lenders themselves have I would say a cutoff date and time within what we call E-Tran, which is where they then transmit the loan through. And so they're going to get cut off, by June 30, let's say, 11:59 p.m.
Yeah.
So if they have a volume of loans because everybody's rushing out, on the last day to get, to apply, they're not going to have enough time to even review the application. So it's a process. It's a process. Next, please. So how will it be forgiven? When at least 60% of the funds are used for payroll. So one of the things that we have advised folks, and I hope that the lenders of the folks that have received PPP have as well, to try to open a separate account for the PPP. It's going to get, normally the funds get dispersed in, whatever, for example, routing account number you give the lender. But it's best if you try to open up a separate account within that same lending institution, just to keep those funds separate, right? Because it's going to be much easier later to be accountable for those funds and how the funds were used, because you are going to have to document a lot in order to get forgiveness. And so remember, this is just, right now, everybody's just kind of, I want to get approved. I need my money. I have to use it for payroll. However, the forgiveness piece is going to be, I believe, a little bit complicated later if you don't have a really good paperwork trail, right? And so that for that reason, we suggest folks to folks, keep a really good paperwork trail. If you use QuickBooks or whatever or if you have an accountant that does that, make sure that you keep that funding separately so that you can, then later, when you have to show forgiveness, when you have to show documentation for the forgiveness, that you have that in order. Again, forgiveness is based on the employer maintaining or quickly rehiring employees and maintaining salary levels. Who is eligible to apply for the PPP if you still have not applied? Small businesses are considered businesses with 500 or fewer employees. In the past, not-for-profits, veterans organizations, or any faith-based organizations were not eligible. All those rules were thrown out the window. They are eligible. So if you do have a not-for-profit, you can apply. Again, self-employed person, sole proprietors, independent contractors. So these are all I would say organizations or that are not normally eligible for traditional SBA loans. Not so much sole proprietors or independent contractors, but for example, not-for-profits or faith-based organizations, just because they receive funding from other sources. So we try to focus strictly on for-profit businesses. So as you could see, just about anybody that's out there, performing, some kind of a business is eligible. Next, please. So the maximum loan amount of, of the PPP is $10 million. The interest rate is 1%, which is wonderful. The first payment is deferred for 6 months. So let's say you received your loan, you receive your loan now, after, I don't know, today, let's say, June 11th. So your first payment will not be due until 6 months from now. Again, the loan maturity is 2 years. So it's 2 years upon, I would say that, the first payment, right? So it's 5 years if the loan is received after June 5th. Okay. There's no collateral requirements, which is not the norm for, for a normal SBA loan. There are no personal guarantees. There are no borrower lender fees payable to SBA. And again, the program is available through June 30th of 2020. So please, if you're thinking about it, don't think too much, because now that it's crunch time, we're almost at 2 weeks away. Folks are going to be, running to do this. And again, what's going to happen is what happened in the, in the beginning, where lenders were inundated and it was taking a while for folks to, to get the cash dispersed into their accounts. So again, if business are, one of the questions are businesses with over 500 employees eligible in the hospitality and food industry and with more than one location? Maybe. Again, it all depends on the type of industry, right? And so, and if at a store or location level, if there are less than 500 employees, absolutely. So what counts as payroll cost? Okay, salaries, wages, commissions, or tips, employee benefits, because sometimes in your salary, you include everything, right? Benefits that include a vacation, medical leave, sick leave, allowance for separation or dismissal, payments are required for provision of group health care insurance, or the payment of any retirement benefits. So you can, lump that in as your payroll cost. And so for sole proprietors and independent contractors that, a lot of them, work on commission. So the wages include commissions, income or net earnings from self-employment. So those are definitely things that can be included as payroll. There is a cap of $100,000. So for those folks out there that, make more than that, unfortunately, that is the cap. So, you'll have to, if you are approved, just know that, if your salary is, 170, if you're making over 175 because of your, commissions or tips or whatnot, it's going to be brought down to 100,000. Next. So in terms of loan forgiveness, you will owe money when your loan is due, when you use the loan amount for anything other than, than payroll costs, right? Because that's what this loan was created for. If you use it for anything other than mortgage interest or rent and utility payments over the 8 weeks of receiving the loan, or if you use less than 75% of the loan amount for payroll. But again, now that 75 has turned to 60. So again, that's when the loan forgiveness is in question, right? And so that's when you can get into a little bit of trouble and end up, with maybe a portion of the loan that is not forgiven. So again, if you do not maintain your staff and payroll as of February 15, do not maintain the staff levels that that you had originally reported. So, and again, to qualify for loan forgiveness, full-time employee headcount must be maintained, salaries and wages must be maintained, and you have until June 30th to restore your full-time employment and salary levels for any changes made between February 15th and April 26th. So there's just a lot of dates that you need to be cognizant of for the whole loan forgiveness, because it's all about keeping your employees off unemployment. And if they were initially on unemployment, let's say until your loan came through, then that needed to be automatically suspended. And so that then you could start upon the date of, that your loan gets dispersed, then you start the payroll clock from then on, because they can't, employees can't do both. They can't be receiving a salary from you on behalf of this program and also receiving a check from an employer. Next slide. So when I said earlier that you should kind of hurry up, because this is the amount of funds remaining in the Paycheck Protection Program. It's what is that, $130 billion. What I can tell you is that this is a national number. okay? This is not just for Connecticut, this is a national number. So in the next 2 weeks, we are going to see influx of small business owners, of entrepreneurs that have not yet, you know, I would say pull the trigger in terms of, you know, submitting an application, you know, putting through their application. So I know that the money is going to go quickly. So we want to make sure that, you know, Connecticut gets its fair share. So if you're still thinking about it because of, you know, for whatever reason you hadn't done so earlier, and maybe because you weren't sure because of the different dates that, you know, our government, local government has put out in terms of, you know, when the phases of reopening, this is, you know, this may be the, you know, your last opportunity. So earlier I mentioned the EIDL loan, which is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. So this was the first loan program that came out under the CARES Act. So EIDL loan started, I would say we started, this portal opened up in March. And so from, you know, I want to say from the beginning of March, I don't have the exact date in my head now, to June 6th, we have 12,985 loans approved in our state, totaling over $1 billion. And so with this EIDL loan, this was specifically created. In the beginning, we didn't have the PPP loan that I just spoke about. We just had the EIDL loan. So the proceeds for the EIDL loan, the use of the proceeds are very fluid. So those could have been used for payroll, for operating expenses, for let's say you own, you know, for whatever business you may own, you may have had to make an investment in PPE just to be able, you know, to reopen. That's what the proceeds of this loan is for, you know, because it's working capital for your business. So one of the things that they did later was they made several adjustments. They I think a couple weeks after releasing this loan, then they created what they called that, if anybody heard of it, called the $10,000 grant. And so in the beginning, you know, for those folks that applied for this EIDL loan, they thought everyone thought that they were going to get automatically $10,000. And then we found out a little bit later on, no, it's going to be $1,000 per employee. So even if you have 30 employees, you were only going to get 10,000. If you have 3 employees, you get 3,000. And that is in the form of a grant. So that is forgivable. You don't have to repay that piece. However, the other portion of the EIDL loan, because you would have, if you received it, you would have received it in 2 separate, I would say, disbursements. You would have gotten the grant, and then you would have gotten the, you know, the total of the loan. Let's say it's, I don't know, $50,000, for example. And so, or, you know, sometimes they received one before the other because the grant that, the offer of the grant didn't come till a little bit later. So that's how that works. So that portal is currently closed and only, again, like I mentioned earlier, is only open to farmers for, you know, livestock, any type of what they call, I believe, aquaponic, whatever type business, anything that has to do with farming. That's what it's open for. It was to give our rural communities an opportunity to also go in and apply. The reason why they closed it for I would say general businesses is because they really needed to catch up on the millions of applications that they had sitting in backlog. And so there are people that are now just getting their EIDL loans, because remember, this was the first program that came out under the CARES Act, so everybody jumped on it. And then PPP came out about 30 days later. And then they said, okay, well, you know, this one is going to be, you know, the majority of the PPP is going to be, you know, specifically for payroll to keep folks off unemployment. So that was kind of like the rhyme and reason for all of that. Next. So originally, I'm sharing this slide with you because originally there were some issues where you may have heard that certain lenders were not taking in, were not taking PPP applications, or were not taking were not taking applications if you were not already their customer, or one thing or the other. And so one of the things that the government did was then what they did was they approved what we call fintech, financial technology companies, to also be able to to approve PPP loans. And that worked really, really well for a lot of our small business owners that, only have a couple of employees, or depending on their industry, they already use PayPal or Square to pay their bills, to do their payroll. So it made it really easy, and the turnaround is very, very fast. I would say a lot faster than with a traditional lender. And so I listed here some of the fintech, because some of you on the call today may already use some of these. And if you're, and maybe you did not know that these fintechs are, definitely credible and have been approved to work with SBA and process our PPP loans. So that all of a sudden kind of, I would say it freed up a lot of the lenders, and the backlog all of a sudden, just became a lot more, I would say, tolerable, in the sense where, folks did not have to wait as long to receive their proceeds. Next. So I'm ending here with any questions. And what I could tell you is this is very good, as a lot of you know, it has a lot of pieces to it. It's been moving quite a bit. And if you have any questions that I cannot answer for you, I can definitely take these questions back and have, somebody either in my office or in the Office of Disaster Assistance or Capital Access try to answer some of these questions. Because what I could tell you is a lot of them are very technical in terms of, I would say, taxes and wages. And so sometimes they do require an accountant to come in and kind of, look over it and, give their final words of wisdom. But again, our EIDL loans are being processed through the SBA Office of Disaster Assistance. So that is not even a portal that I have access to here. So at SBA, we're broken down, by departments and whatnot. So there's a lot of information that if you tell me, for example, if you say, you know what, I applied for an EIDL loan and, I still haven't received it. What I can tell you is, shoot me an email, send me your loan number and the name of your business, and then I can forward that to the Office of Disaster Assistance. But I myself cannot, from this end, cannot go into the portal and look at the status of that loan. I can, however, on a PPP loan, because those are being done by our SBA preferred lenders. So it's just a little bit different on the information that, we can access and we cannot. So that's why, I apologize in advance for some questions that I may not be able to answer.
And I'm going to turn it over to Joni with our BBB, who's been monitoring our questions box. Joni, are there any good questions?
Oh, we have quite a few.
Oh, no.
Okay, I'm going to try to ask them as they came in. What if an employee resigns? Is that counted against you when applying for forgiveness?
Well, if the employer resigned, then you should not list, because it's going to say, number of employees. If that employee resigned, then you shouldn't list them, on your PPP application. That's one person less that you have to be accountable for. And honestly, a lot of people have, just because in terms of not so much for job security, but I've heard a lot of folks say, well, I'm going to, make more money off on unemployment than I am, from my employer, or by the time my employer is able to pay me. So that has happened quite a bit. So just make sure that you don't include that person if, they've already resigned, because if not, you are going to be accountable for that. That will turn, that won't be forgivable. That will turn into a loan.
Okay. What forms do we need to submit, and what information must we provide to qualify for forgiveness?
Okay, so actually a new application came out, I want to say, I just got it this morning. So the one that I talked about earlier that came out about 2 weeks ago, that's about 11 pages long, that was amended. And so what I could do is I could share it with Jackie and Joni, and maybe they can email it to the viewer, to all the listeners today. How's that?
Sure, yeah, I can attach it to the email that
Because
goes out to everybody joined today's call. If you
Sure,
need it,
and I believe-
email that to us.
I believe it's already published on the US Treasury website, but if you want to, just not have to hunt for it, I can definitely send it to you. It's in a PDF document. One of the things that I heard a complaint about an hour ago was that it's one of these PDFs that is not one of the, that you can't fill in. So that might have to be revised a little bit. So again, another revision.
Okay, we had a couple of people ask this question. What about the 40%? That is not forgivable?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that 40% was to cover your rent, utilities, mortgage, lease as of, I believe, February 15th.
Right.
So as soon as your business closed, again, you're not making any money. So that money, those proceeds are supposed to be used for that. And so if you don't need that, then you definitely talk to your lender so that you can return those funds, during the whole safe harbor, so that you're not penalized later. Okay. Because that will turn into a loan, even though it's 1%. You want to be, if you don't need the funds, definitely return them.
This person has an insurance agency. He says, part of my overhead includes subscription software, such as my database and comparative rating programs. I consider these to be utilities. Can we use PPP money for this, for internet and phones?
It sounds like you can. There's about 90% of me that's saying yes, but the other 10%, I would check either with your accountant or your lender. Because again, if you can account for them as part of, your utilities, I don't see why there would be a problem. Not all, sometimes I understand, because not everything is tangible, right? So again, if you can account for these and how, in how they represent, that piece of the loan of utilities you said, then yes.
Okay, this question, I have another question, totally different topic. I had a part-time employee that we were paying PPP, and she went MIA and applied for unemployment. So we decided to discharge her. What happens to the funds that were paid to her?
So you can account for the funds that were paid to her. Absolutely. You can definitely account. And then you can also, so you can account for whatever, funding was paid for her. And then whatever was not, you need to talk to your lender about how, you can return that, because you don't want to be accountable. You don't want that to turn into a loan, right?
Right.
So, yeah. And again, a lot of crazy things like that has happened. A lot.
Yeah. Does the extension of 24 weeks to use the funds and rehire also apply to those who received loans prior to June 5th?
I'm under the impression that it does. I just want to confirm that. Okay, to be forgivable, the borrower must use the PPP loans proceeds no later than the earlier of 24 weeks following the date of loan origination. So that was the reason why they kind of did the 24 weeks, because 8 was too short.
Okay, thank you.
I'm saying it's a yes.
Does paying out unused vacation or sick time fall under payroll expenses?
Yes. If you use that as part of kind of like the compensation, the wages, then yes.
Do you have to hire the same employees back?
No. No, just because things change, right? So during COVID, a lot of folks have, you know, I want to say flown the coop, right? So it doesn't have to be the same employee. Preferably, it would be the same number of employees, but it doesn't have to be the same person or persons. Because you want to justify the wages somehow. COVID has given a lot of folks the opportunity to also, you know, make those necessary personnel changes that they probably didn't have the opportunity to make, you know, earlier on with, you know, great performers or underperformers.
Mhm.
So yeah, so we've seen a lot of things like that happen.
Can you apply for additional funds, or is it still just for 8 weeks of payroll only?
You cannot apply for 2 PPP loans. You can only apply for 1. The same thing with the EIDL. However, we do have other SBA lending programs. So if you need additional, you know, working capital, there are, you know, other SBA loan programs that are in full effect that you can definitely take a look at, or, you know, I can talk to you more about offline.
Are new employees considered toward the forgiveness portion of the loan?
If they're new and they're hired within, you know, this whole COVID pandemic, and you know, you have hired them and you have them, you know, serving in some capacity, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to read this question word for word because I'm not really sure I understand it. She wasn't sure that it was clear. Can you please clarify? I understand that there's now 24 weeks to use the money, but do you still pick 8 weeks within the 24-week period, or you can continue to pay employees for up to the number of weeks the money will last?
So the way the loan is calculated and approved, originally it was for the 8 weeks. Okay, so that's kind of how the calculations were done by the lender, you know, by taking a look at your receivables or your P&L statements or your whatever you submitted to them. So what it says here is a borrower that received a PPP loan prior to the enactment of the Flexibility Act can elect for the covered period of the loan to end after the original 8-week period. So if you need the extra time, you definitely want to let, you know, the lender know where you stand, you know, with your loan, you know, with, you know, especially the payroll portion, which is what most folks are more concerned about, because they want that to be forgiven later. They, you know, everyone wants that to turn into the grant that, you know, they initially applied for. So I don't know if I answered your question 100%, but I think that you should definitely discuss that with your lender as soon as possible, or if you have an accountant.
Okay, this is that question we spoke about previously. I just want to bring this up in case anyone else is wondering. As a self-employed person who was receiving PUA, if I open up in 2 weeks and hire back my 3 employees and myself, can I drop out of PUA and start using the PPP for rent, payroll, etc.?
And PUA stands for?
I just looked it up. Let me look.
I
It's Pandemic Unemployment Assistance.
And did this person already apply for a PPP?
That we don't know.
Okay. Because you can't really have both. Because the pandemic unemployment assistance, I'm assuming is, probably came through the Department of Labor
Mhm.
for payroll expenses. And so you can't have both. And on the forgiveness form, you will see where it'll say, have you received any other type of funds? Have you received an EIDL loan? Have you received an EIDL grant? Have you received unemployment? Again, this is going to take a while to figure out once it's all put together, right? Once COVID is over, you just want to make sure that you're on the safe side, because you don't want to get audited later and have to owe the government money. So just make sure that it's either one or the other.
Right. And I don't see any more questions. I think we've covered all of them.
Okay, and remember, this is so fluid. So again, for all of you borrowers that are listening to this webinar, just be very, very proactive on going on the SBA.gov website or the US Treasury and looking for weekly updates, because I'm telling you, for some reason, Fridays around 5 o'clock, we get something new coming in. So just be proactive, because you want to be, you want to be the solution, right? You don't want to be searching for the problem, right? You want to already have it. You want to have the information so that you're not hit with a surprise, 90 days from now that, the proceeds were, not utilized appropriately, and therefore, that whole, PPP loan is PPP is now, unforgivable, that you will have to pay it all back. So just be very wary of that.
We also had two more questions actually come in. Here's a question. I'm the owner of a home care agency and am an essential worker. I had to leave my home and stay in a hotel for several weeks. Is the hotel cost considered rent, lease, etc., using my PPP loan?
Oh my. Okay, so if you had to leave your home, I guess you just have to be able to document the reason why you had to leave your home and go to a hotel, right? Using that as, you know what I mean, as your alibi in order to make that, because that portion of the PPP is a loan anyway, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
But I think you need to be able to document, the reason for making that drastic change. And so that you may have to, talk to the lender on how you can document that accordingly.
Okay. And then there's also other questions. If you could kind of reiterate, so in order to have your loan forgiven, I believe you covered at least 60% had to go to payroll, and 40% had to go to utilities, rent, all of that. So a lot of people are asking, why is that 40% sometimes, turning into a loan and not being forgiven, if that makes sense? I think there's a lot of confusion on our questions about that 60-40 ratio.
I mean, it started with 75-25, but then one of the things that was happening was that it was I guess the feedback was that 75 was too much for payroll, and 25 was not enough to cover the rent, rent, mortgage, utilities, or interest on, on the mortgage. So that's where the configuration from 60 to 40 was done.
Okay.
The question why, and again, because this is when normally when there are natural, or man-made disasters, we have the funding that we have available is in the form of a loan. And, you know, the lowest you can possibly get is 1%. That's the lowest. And with the EIDL loan, if for those of you that received an EIDL loan, that term is 30 years. So, you know, so the government, I mean, honestly, the SBA is not in the business of giving out grants per se, even though, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Unfortunately, you know, somehow or another, you know, it has to be repaid.
So that means that 40% is not forgivable ever, even if you use that
Right.
60 towards payroll. Is that correct?
Yes, however,
Hey,
just
okay.
make sure that you clear that up with your lender, because if you received your proceeds prior to, you know, the Flexibility Act of June 5th, and you've already made the allocations of the 75-25, you make sure that you clarify that with the lender, because that's a big difference, you know, in terms of having 25, having a loan that's, you know, let's say it was $100,000, you know, paying back 25,000, you know, versus that, versus the 40%. So you make sure that, you know, you have that documented, that, you know, your loan, the proceeds were dispersed before, you know, June 5th and were utilized prior to that. So that can be honored.
Okay. All right, Joni, any other questions that you scanned through?
One more. It's about a daycare. What if you do not have the same number of employees by the time it needs to be used to use up the PPP? For example, a daycare that now doesn't have the same amount of children it had in February, and therefore doesn't need to hire as many staff members.
So I'm assuming that when you apply for the PPP, you probably apply, when you put down the number of staff, you probably put at full capacity.
Right.
I'm assuming that could have happened.
Right.
However, we know that that changed quickly because schools and everything closed.
Right.
So you want to make sure that you lender know immediately so that you can return that funding under the Act, so that you're not, so that it doesn't become a loan.
I don't think I have any others.
Okay. And again, my email's on the screen. And so if you think of something later and you want to email me, you know, I will definitely, you know, I definitely respond to emails, and I can, and if I don't know the answer, I can get somebody that does.
Okay, perfect. And I also had one more quick question here. Are employees' bonuses a part of payroll costs for PPP?
If it's under the $100,000, yes.
Okay.
If it's, you know, if it falls under wages, and it is.
All right, well, we appreciate your time. I'm also going to have you send me that link to the updated application so that we can email that out to everybody who was a part of today's broadcast. We appreciate you taking time to kind of answer everybody's questions and kind of educate us as much as possible. Since, like you said, it seems like it is changing weekly, and people are lost. And I mean, it's great that you are able to kind of come on and help everybody kind of grasp all of these changes and how to best serve our small businesses here in Connecticut. So we really appreciate your time.
Absolutely, glad to do it. And again, good luck to you entrepreneurs in, you know, the whole opening up of your small businesses. We wish you the best of luck. And again, we have resource partners that are completely free that can help you, you know, decipher, you know, a new business, you know, what we call a recovery plan, right? For, because a lot of folks have to switch gears, you know, in terms of, depending on the industry that they're in, they might not be able to go back, you know, as they once were. So, okay.
Yes, and
Thank
we
you.
totally agree. BBB echoes that. Anybody attempting to reopen their small business, we also wish you all the best, and know that SBA and BBB are both here to answer as many questions as we possibly can answer. And if we don't know that answer, we will try to help you find out who can answer it for you. So again, we appreciate your time, Moriama. And everybody, please have a great rest of your afternoon. We appreciate you coming on to our broadcast today, and check out the email coming to your inboxes soon with the recording of today's broadcast and that link to the updated application. Thanks again, everyone.
Bye-bye.